Hey guys, it's Courtney and welcome to day one of 5 cards, 1 kit for the My Monthly Hero August 2018. We are going to take a quick look at the kit here. It comes with the white puffy embossing powder, this clear lacquer pen, 2 pieces of this pattern paper which is like tea dyed and it's gorgeous. It comes with a 6x8 stamp set with lots and lots of coffee themed images along with a ton of sentiments. It also comes with the coordinating dies along with this standalone die. So for my first card here, we're going to make a very quick, very clean and simple card. I started by taking my Misty and I'm going to be placing my mask here for my coffee cup just for placement alone. I'm going to match up that little whipped cream there, remove my mask, and then stamp this down with Barely Beige ink by Simon Says Stamp, just because I didn't want any harsh black lines there. Next, I'll go ahead and mask that out and switch over to Intense Black ink by Simon Says Stamp, and I'll line up that coffee cup, mask that out, and then I'm going to be stamping out 2 additional coffee cups with just plain lids to them rather than the whipped cream. So I'm going to mask out the lid and then go ahead and stamp out the coffee cups on either side. Once my images were all stamped out, I went ahead and removed my masks and we'll move on to some very simple Copic coloring. For the cups themselves, I'm going to be using my warm grays. I'll start off with my W7, which is my darkest color, and I'm just adding a little bit to the coffee cups that are on either side. These would naturally be darker, and also they're laying behind this middle coffee cup, so that would cast a shadow. So I'm just putting in that W7 just in those areas. Then I'll move on to my W5, and that's when I'll start my flicking from either side, also extending that line from underneath the lid where that would create a shadow. Next, I'll move on to my W3 and extend those flicks even further. And then finally my W1, extending those flicks right to the center. These are round objects, so you want to make sure that your highlight is right in the center of the cup itself. This other cup on the other side, I'm going to be coloring the same exact way as the first. Now the flicks for my W5 are a little bit longer on these 2 cups just because these would naturally be darker. They're in the background. And then when I move on to this middle cup here, I'm going to be using the same color combination, but I did not use that W7. I'm going to create my shadow for underneath the whipped cream, and I will start my flicking, but you'll notice that my flicks are just a little bit shorter than for the cups on either side of it. I'll move on to my W3 and extend those flicks. Again, not quite as far as I did with the cups on either side. In the end, it really isn't noticeable, especially because I'm going to be adding my sentiment to that middle cup. But I'll go ahead and add my W1 here, leaving a generous highlight, almost white there in the center. For the lids of the coffee cups, I'll move on to my C markers, which are the cool grays, and just starting with my C5 on either side, moving on to my C3, extending those flicks, and then finally the C1 filling in that center. Again, round object, highlight in the center. Now these coffee cups are kind of just floating there, so I wanted to create a shadow for each of them. I start off with my C5 and just kind of lay out some color there, not really being too particular. Then I'll move on to my C3 and extend that out a little bit on either side and down, and then finally my C1 and extend that out even further. Keep in mind you can kind of manipulate the shape of your shadows with your lightest color by just moving the darker colors around. For my sentiment, I'm going to be using Cup of Joe ink by Hero Arts and stamping that right in the center of that middle coffee cup. Now for the whipped cream, I knew I wanted to use the embossing powder. I wasn't sure about using that clear lacquer pen, but I decided to try it. I didn't want to fill in the entire area. I wanted there to be differences within the dimension, I guess you would say, of the whipped cream. So I'm basically just tracing the lines of the stamp, and then I'll go in with that embossing powder, cover up that entire area, and then heat set it. Now, I didn't wait for that ink that I used for the sentiment to be completely dry. Even though it's a dye ink and it dries pretty quickly, it wasn't completely dry, so I did have to wipe up some of that embossing powder with my finger. And now I did kind of be careful with not adding too much heat to this, but it did warp the paper just a little bit, and it was looking a little plain. So what I decided to do was to just create a border, kind of freehand, even though I'll be using my T-squared ruler. And I'm using a Copics safe pen, not that it matters because we don't have any Copic ink in the background. But I'm using an EK Success journaling pen. And I'm not measuring here. I'm just kind of doing this freehand, drawing 2 lines on the top. Then I'll flip my card panel around, and as close to the measurements as possible, I created 2 more lines. And then on either side, I freehanded another straight line there. This is when I noticed that one coffee cup off to the left was a lot closer to the edge than the other one. So I decided to trim down my panel a little bit. So here I'll go in and add another line closer to the line on the left, and then I'll take my paper trimmer and just trim off that side, as well as a little bit from the top and a little bit from the bottom, just so that I would have an even border around my card base. Last, I adhered this to an A2 size card base. This is Nina Desert Storm cardstock, and I just adhered that flat, and that is it for card number 1. Thank you guys so much for stopping by, and come back tomorrow for day number 2. Have a great day.